Wow, I hate to follow that. That's lovely. Good evening, everyone. I'm Susan Wadsworth Booth, and I'm the director of the Kent State University Press. And I am just excited and honored to be able to welcome you all to this presentation tonight. And I want to give you just a little bit of background about how the Kent State University Press has come to this project. In 2019, so it's been quite a while ago, Edith Sarkonik, who's the director of the Fashion Library at Kent State, was wonderful enough, as she often is, to introduce Dr. Tameka Ellington and myself over email. She knew that Tameka was working on some really interesting projects, and the Kent State University Press publishes a book series in conjunction with the Costume Society of America, which, when I got to Kent State 5.5 years ago, I didn't quite understand what that was, but it doesn't have to do with just costuming. It has to do with all aspects of fashion history and culture, and the implications of those topics in the world. So when I began talking with Tameka about the work that she was doing, it was very exciting. We first had lunch together in June of 2019 to talk about the possibility of a book project like this. We had a great lunch at a little Middle Eastern restaurant in Kent that she suggested, the Continental Grill, which unfortunately after the pandemic now no longer exists. And that's a shame, because we had a delicious lunch and a great conversation. And that started the process for doing this book. And, as I said, it's been a long time coming. The pandemic got in the way. We were working with a number of contributors. Tameka was working with putting the exhibit together that the book grew out of, the textures exhibit at the Kent State Museum, which was absolutely amazing. I know a number of you here on this Zoom call saw that exhibit, and it was just an amazing exhibit. I went back twice and really would have loved to have gone back a third time. Just so much to see, and really a work of art in and of itself as an exhibit. Anyway, the book has now gotten to the point where it will be released in July, which we're very excited about. And I will give you information about that a little later, so that if you would like to get a copy, as soon as it comes out, you can. It has a wonderful array of contributors in the book, some of whom are represented here this evening on this panel. So much great discussion to come out of this. One of the things I love about my work is that I'm always learning new things. And I certainly have learned a lot of things from this book, and all of the Costume Society books, frankly, because I didn't know it was a topic I could ever be interested in to think about fashion history, but it has been quite fascinating to me. I would also just want to say that I love the way Dr. Tameka Ellington describes her work. And so to formally introduce you to her and to get all of this started this evening, let me just tell you a little bit about her. Dr. Tameka Ellington was an associate professor of fashion and assistant dean and director for diversity initiatives for the College of the Arts at Kent State. She's currently the CEO of Dr. Tameka Ellington Enterprises, a personal, professional, and spiritual wellness company. She's a speaker. She is an acclaimed person in the fashion scholar world. She's a professional development strategist, and she's the author of several books, one of which is Textures, The History and Art of Black Hair, which also grew out of this exhibit, which is the exhibit catalog that was put together. And I also recommend that book to you. It's quite beautiful. And I really love the way Tameka Ellington describes her work and her life purpose. Through keynotes, coaching, and authoring books, she helps Black people recall their beauty outside the dominant ideals so they can increase their appreciation of their culture and love of their own authentic beauty. That is a beautiful statement. And with that, I will let Dr. Tameka Ellington take over the presentation and the panel discussion. And I know we'll have a lot of great questions and a lot of interaction that we will all gain from. So let's go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Sue. And I want to say just thank you to everyone here. Welcome, welcome. Happy Black History Month to you all. Karabu, that's a way that you say welcome in Swahili. Thank you very much. Asante Sana. That's something that I often will put in my email signature. So if you've ever gotten an email from me, I'm sure you've seen that my email signature always says Asante Sana. It's a way for me to give homage to my ancestors, all the work that I've done over these past years. I contribute that to my ancestors. But we send you love and we send you blessings, and we thank you all for being here with us. And so I'm going to begin a little bit. I just wanted to find out from you who is here. If you wouldn't mind putting your university or your organization that you're affiliated with in the chat so that we can see who all is here. There's about 43 people on the call, and so I just want to acknowledge you where you're from. I know there's probably an eclectic mix of individuals that are on this call. And so I just wanted to say hello to you. Thank you all for coming. Yes, yes. Wonderful. Yes, absolutely. Oh, nice, nice, nice. I'm glad you all are here. Yes. American University. Where's American University? I wonder where that's at. I'll have to look that up. Nice, DC.
Washington, D.C., yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay. Florida A&M. Wow. Nice. Hi, Dr. McLeod. Dr. McLeod. LaGrange. Oh, wow. I'm just so honored. I am really and truly honored. But the conceptualization of this book um, truly came out of looking at the history. A lot of the history about Black people happens to stem from the Atlantic slave trade. And so Afro textured hair has been scrutinized since the start of the Atlantic slave trade. And newly enslaved Africans' bodies, facial features, and hair were and still are animalized. The conceptualization of Black hair in a white world is also inspired by the trauma that Black people are still facing with hair discrimination. It's been still prevalent even after 150 years after the abolishment of slavery. Black people are still dealing with discrimination. And these are just two examples. I'm sure you all remember the high school wrestler Andrew Johnson, who was forced to cut his hair right at the wrestling match. And then you may have heard about Brittany Noble Jones. She was a news anchor who was fired from her job because she decided that she wanted to wear her hair in its natural state. The conceptualization of Black hair in a white world also comes from the fact that most Black women born with Afro texture hair living in a colonized nation have a hair story of struggle or a hair story of triumph. And this is something that is a global issue. It's something that is very prevalent here in the United States. And that's where this book has come from. And it's also come from the years of my own personal experiences. My personal experiences ignited about 15 years of scholarly work on this topic of Black hair. And when I first started in academia, I remember so many people were questioning me about what could I possibly research about Black hair. They didn't realize that there was such a depth and breadth to this particular phenomenon and that there was much to be researched. And so from Ghana. Hi, Ghana. I'm so excited to have you all on here with me, but I'm going to read just a small excerpt from the introduction of Black Hair in a White World. And this passage will further break down for you the conceptualization of how Black hair in a white world came to be. As a Black woman, I have taken it as my mission for the last 15 years to research Black beauty to understand why it is hated, even after more than a century since Blacks were in bondage. I learned about the immense mental stronghold that colonizing philosophies had on the world. Blacks and whites have both been brainwashed to devalue the Black body. Along with other scholars such as Ananya Beard, Laura Tharps, Lori Tharps, Cheryl Thompson, Ingrid Banks, I've been able to slowly chip away at the history of and negative connotations around Black hair and the importance of redefining what Black hair is and can be. My mother took great pride in caring for my hair. However, I was missing an element of beauty and femininity. I started noticing that the little boys always liked the girls with the long, straight hair. My fifth grade year was one of my most challenging. I had the biggest crush on a boy in my class, and I remember always wanting to play on his team and be next to him in line as my classmates and I walked back into the school building from recess. One day, as we were shuffling in line to come back into the building from recess, I must have been overly enthralled with my crush because he noticed. He laughed at me and teased, "What are you looking at, Naparoni?" And then belted out in song, "Naparoni," the San Francisco treat, lyrics that he adopted from the Rice-A-Roni's popular TV commercial. I was brokenhearted, but I laughed it off to show that I wasn't fazed. This was among the first of many traumas I experienced regarding my hair. The summer of my freshman year of college, I decided to work at an amusement park because I could live on its campus and maintain my newly found young adult freedom. During the new employee orientation, they mentioned the company uniform and sneakers we were required to wear. They discussed adornments such as no large tattoos, no piercings, and no wild hair colors were allowed. Further, they said employees could not wear afros, braids, or locks. These are all natural hairstyles typically worn by Black people. I was taken aback by this policy because I was actually wearing a cute curly afro, and management's final words were, "Employees must look all American." From that instant, I knew that I would not be able to endure an entire summer at that amusement park. And so after 1 month, I returned home. I could not deny the hunger for information about my hair. Why? Why can't I wear my hair the way I want? Why can companies dictate how Black people wear their hair? Is this right? And how can this be? And since 2002, I've published a thesis, several academic articles, encyclopedia journals about Black hair. I'm a designer and scholar, and much of my creative scholarship has been centered on Black art and culture. And for many years, I've dreamt of curating an exhibition with Black hair artifacts to tell the story of Black beauty. In partnership, in partnership with African art historian Dr. Joseph Underwood, Textures, the History and Art of Black Hair was born. The show opened on fall 2021, featuring more than 200 historic objects, artifacts, and contemporary works of art. The show encompassed a full story of Black hair, from ancient Egyptian artifacts to new works by artists such as Sonia Clark and Kehinde Wiley. The phenomenon of Black hair continues to be a societal point of contention. Natural Black hair has been and still is criticized by non-Blacks and Blacks who believe that natural texture of hair is a problem. Black hair is still the brunt of jokes, is undesirable, heavily discriminated against, and overly manipulated to adhere to white beauty standards. This discrimination keeps children from going to school, prevents women and men from climbing the corporate ladder, and insists that Black hair must acculturate if its wearer wants to be given half a chance at a happy, successful life. This is a global problem, and it is especially prevalent in the United States. A few examples were those of Andrew Johnson, who I was just talking about, Brittany Noble Jones, the news anchor who lost her job, who I also just spoke about, and then, of course, Faith Finity, the young lady that you all just saw in the video that Mickey Guyton was singing, "I Love My Hair." And as I was conceptualizing Black hair in a white world, I began to dream of a text that would offer a diverse yet unified look at Black hair and culture. I have worked with and admired other amazing scholars focused on Black hair. Friends in academia from different universities across the nation recommended that I consider working with their colleagues or newly graduated doctoral students. With the book, I wanted to be able to cover various aspects of Black hair, from politics to history and culture to Black hair movements of yesterday and today. And after 6 months of searching and interviewing authors, I settled on this dynamic group of scholars: Dr. Michaela Brown, Dr. Lauren Cross, Dr. Annette Lynch, Dr. Afia Bilashaka, Dr. Talay Mitchell, Dr. Teresa Moses. I'm putting doctor on there because she is a PhD student, and Dr. Tar Taylor and LaDosha Wright. Dr. Lauren Cross, please come to the stage. She is an interdisciplinary artist, filmmaker, curator, and scholar whose work has been screened and exhibited across the country. Cross earned her Bachelor's of Arts in Design and Media from Richmond, the American International University in London, her Master's of Fine Arts in Visual Arts from Lindsay University in Cambridge. She has a PhD in Multicultural Women's and Gender Studies from Texas Women's University. She is a passionate advocate for diversity in the arts and has written and contributed research in the fields of women's studies, visual studies, and multicultural studies. Dr. Afia Bilashaka is a therapist, professor, research scientist, hair historian, and stylist. She is owner of the Ma'at, I hope I pronounced that right, Psychological Services, a private practice in Boston, Massachusetts, focused on promoting balance and restoring the lives of her clients. She previously served as assistant professor of psychology and psychology chair at the University of District Columbia. She innovated the practice of research of psychotherapy, which she uses hair as an entry point for mental health services and beauty salons and barbershops, as well as through social media. Dr. Talay Mitchell is an associate professor at the School of Media Arts and Design at James Madison University. She holds a PhD in Media Communications and Advertising Strategy and a Master's of Science in Advertising from the University of Illinois. Her research interest focuses on how the media influences societies through marketing, advertising, race, and body image. Teresa Moses is a proud she's a proud Black queer woman dedicated to the liberation of Black and Brown people through art and design. She is a creative director of Blackbird Revolt, an assistant professor of graphic design, and the director of design justice at the University of Minnesota. As a community engaged scholar, she created Project Natural and co-created Racism Untaught. She is currently a PhD candidate in social justice education at the University of Toronto, and she serves as core team member of the African American Graphic Designers and as a collaborator of the Black Liberation Lab. Dr. Tar Taylor is a natural hair stylist in Atlanta and assistant professor at Morehouse College in social sciences. She holds a bachelor's of finance degree from Howard University, a master's and PhD in sociology from Georgia State University, and her research interests are diverse, including sociology of education, social determinants of health, social movements, and entrepreneurship, all of which converge into her express interest of interdisciplinary or intersectionality and micro level resistance. Dr. Tara's work increases sociological knowledge about Black women's perceptions and ideologies about collective consciousness, collective action, health, and social change. And so this is my dream team. I have been so blessed to work with these women. As Sue mentioned, we started this project in 2019, and we've all been together since then. We worked through the pandemic. Many of the ladies have had many life-changing shifts in their careers, myself included. And I just want to thank these women for, stepping up and staying with me on this. I know it was a long road, but I appreciate all the love and the support and the trust that you put in me to help us get this project finished. And lastly, as Sue had mentioned, I was working with another publisher before I came to the Kent State University Press and was looking to get this book published and was just so frustrated. And so I went and talked to my friend Edith Serkonik, who is a professor and librarian at Kent State University. And I was telling her about the issues, and she recommended that I reach out to Sue. And so, Edie, if you are on here, I just want to say thank you for introducing me to Sue, and for Susan for connecting me with the rest of the amazing staff at the Kent State University Press. And I just want to thank you all for working with me on this project. And so now I'm going to open up the floor so that we can have a discussion with myself and the other scholars that are on. Okay. All right, ladies. So you all had an opportunity to hear a little bit about my experience with growing up with kinky hair, and how the research has been able to inform a lot of my personal experience has been able to inform a lot about the research. And so if you would feel comfortable, I would love for you to share some of memories that you might have about your experiences growing up with texture hair. And anybody can jump in.
I'll start.
Yeah.
Um, when you were telling your story, it just made me think of a lot of different things. And the first thing that came to mind was getting my hair pressed as a child, um, getting the naps out, right?
Yeah.
And the nape of the hair and things like that. That was the biggest thing that I couldn't wait to get a perm so that I can have straight hair like everybody else. But that was the first thing that I thought about when you were telling your story.
I'll jump in. One of the things I thought about was actually getting sort of like that anti-Blackness from my own relatives, especially elder relatives. And in comparing like Black hair, also skin tones. I remember a conversation hearing about like, you know, it was an older family member, and they were saying like, oh, so and so, like one of my sisters, she's dark skinned, but she has good hair. And then so and so, she's light skinned, but her hair is really nappy, blah blah. And I just remember this like comparison around like what's beautiful, and I didn't quite understand why they were talking about it in that way until like later on. Of course, I think I was like in second grade, but I remember that being a topic of conversation like ever since I was little. And then even the pressing of the hair, like anytime there's a special occasion, you are not pretty and well done, like well dressed until like that hair is pressed, till you sit in front of the oven, sweating, grease popping. I just remember all of those experiences to make us like assimilate and be like pretty, in like white Eurocentric standards.
Yeah.
I have similar stories as everyone else, but I was thinking about a narrative that came out of my research that was also kind of similar to my childhood experience. Definitely pressed and getting prepared for, Easter or some special holiday or for church. But the thing was, once you had your hair styled, you weren't allowed to play in it, right? And you weren't allowed to let your friends or your cousins play in your hair.
Yep.
And the idea around this gatekeeping around our hair as well. So one, you get these kind of negative messaging about our natural texture, the fact that it needs to be straightened, but once it's straightened, you can't touch it. It's too precious and no one should play with it or touch it type of thing. You don't have that kind of messaging when your hair is in this Afro puff or anything like that, but once it's straight, it has to stay that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Anybody want to unpack that whole, I mean, that what you just said, Tara, was the fact that it becomes this thing that your hair becomes this thing that is, as you said, precious. It becomes this thing that is that you have to preserve, right? And if we think about Black women today, especially ones that may actually have natural hair, but the ones that like to straighten their hair, maybe they like to straighten out their natural hair. And just think about like all the things in life that us as Black women that we have been excluded from just because of our hair, right? A lot of Black women don't know how to swim because of their hair. I'm one of them, right? A lot of Black women don't go to the gym because they don't want to sweat their hair out. There's so many other things that our quality of life is limited in many ways because of our choice to wear our hair straightened or whatever, our choice to try to assimilate or try to fit into that societal idea of beauty. And I remember when I first went natural. I've been natural now for a long time. It's been since 1998. And just the freedom that I felt, I never felt like, I could go swimming because I always had a perm in my hair or some kind of chemical in my hair. And finally, when I went natural, I could go to the swimming pool and not have to worry about the chemicals reacting with the other chemicals in my hair. So there was just such a freedom with it. Anybody else want to comment on that before we move on to the next?
Well, I'll add.
Yeah, please.
so much for having me in your book and on this panel tonight. But I definitely want to add, I guess, a redirection in terms of my earliest memories of my hair are extremely positive because of my mom's worldview on natural hair. So, you know, being part of the 70s, she named all of her children African names and wanted all of us to embrace our hair texture. And so my early memories are actually of my mom washing my hair. I'm the youngest of 4 children. And so she would wash my hair every Sunday night. And this was the one-on-one time that I was craving in terms of that bathtub wash day experience, where I got such focused attention on my mom, and she would say such words of affirmation about me, about my hair. And even I have these memories of sitting down and watching different TV shows while I was getting my hair done. And my mom would empower me because every time she did my hair, she gave me choice. She said, how many braids do you want this week? And so I'm like 7 or 5. And so she would do these algorithms and mathematical formulas of fractals to create the number that I asked for. And so she was extremely gentle, was very slow moving, so it didn't like hurt. And so I think this really shaped my entrance into the hair research, because I recognize as a hairstylist that a lot of people did not share that experience. And so even thinking about how I've tried to recreate that with my hair and therapy clients. But so it's, again, a more positive and affirming space that I'm entering the conversation because specifically of my mom's approach to hair.
Yeah. Anybody else want to mention anything about that?
Sorry, I'm near an airport, so you may hear a lot of noise.
That's okay.
Just the idea that, you know, that hair needed to be bone straight. You know, I grew up in Houston, so everything was like bone straight. And that really created a sense of anxiety for me growing up, to have anything but bone straight hair. You know, if you had anything poking out, sticking out, you were going to be clowned or talked about. And so I realized how much I was like policing myself because I felt like, you know, I didn't want to be the butt of anybody's jokes or, you know, it was just really, or even just going to the salons, you know, and feeling like if you had waited too long to get your relaxer done, you were going to be ridiculed by your stylist, even as you're paying them to get it done. And so it was all just like an embarrassing, very shaming experience. And there were moments in my life, in my childhood, where, you know, I would have moments of like, I don't want to do this. And, you know, I was scared that I would be, you know, the people would be, you know, would say mean things to me. And ironically, people would say positive things, as there were at that time, you know, some representations like Freddie from a different world. And some people would be like, oh, you're like Freddie from a different world. And I would be like, okay, you know, at least I didn't get a beat down, but I don't know whether to be like, feel like that's a compliment or not. But I think it definitely made me more self-conscious. And even when I decided to go natural, like it was like people were like, you're gonna have to, you know, put your big girl pants on, you know, and buckle up basically. And so I felt like there was a lot to kind of build up to. But I feel now just really free, you know. I don't really care much about what other people think. And, you know, I feel really grateful for the community in Dallas, you know, where I really kind of felt like there was a celebration of Black hair. So I think that made a difference for me.
I think there's something to be said about, Tara, what you had mentioned about after you straighten your hair and, you know, you weren't allowed to have anyone touch it, the correlation to protecting whiteness. There's something, I'm just like, it's like just processing in my mind as you mentioned that. I'm like, what is that about? Like, what is it about, as soon as you get assimilated and you're looking good and you're looking like, we're supposed to look, but then like any other time, like we can be violated. People can have access to us. They can come up and
Wow.
touch our hair. Like there's just so much that I'm like thinking about, that's processing, and I didn't want to let that point go before we moved on, because I feel like that is such an important part of the conversation around like, when we do decide to straighten our hair, like what does that mean for us as far as, our proximity to whiteness versus, our proximity to blackness, and what that means for violation and people being able to be up in our space. I think that's an interesting point.
Wow.
I mean, that's,
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Somebody was about to say something.
yeah, I was going to say that's so dynamic, because in the greater analysis around the whole gatekeeping and the natural hair, especially the grooming process, is how much our bodies as children, even as adult women, adult children, right? Like we're still someone's child, even though we're adults. Our bodies reflect our mother's motherhood and whether or not they're good mothers. So if a child doesn't look put together well, one, as Black children, we recognize that we are seen as delinquent, we're seen as incompetent. But the other thing is the message it says about our family, and particularly about our mothers, if we're not right. So of course, there's the whole history around whether or not your hair texture reveals your African ancestry, or you're 1/3 French, 1/4 German, 1/4, Irish, right? That kind of thing, like, oh, I'm mixed type of thing. But so there's definitely the aesthetic correlation to your African ancestry or your closeness to whiteness, but it's also the idea that when you look put together, what it says about the family that you come from, what it says about you and your intentions and this idea of your goodness. So I'm glad you said that too, because I mean, it really gets into a lot of things around also how we construct this idea around Blackness as inferior in so many different ways, but whiteness disappear in terms of the aesthetic, but also in terms of competence and goodness. So thank you.
Wow. Have any of you ever read the book Brown Girl Dreamin' by Jacqueline Woodson? Any of you? Okay, so actually that book was broken down in our book, Black Hair in a White World. It's, I think, chapter number 2. And in that book, there are so many sections that talk about the regulation, the maintenance of Black hair. And part of the reason why, and that book takes place during the Great Migration, when a lot of Black people were moving from the South up to the North. And the main character, Jacqueline, this is like a memoir. She's talking about her childhood. And so Jacqueline's talking about the fact that it was her grandmother keeping her hair, pressed, braided up, and put ribbons on was a way for her to also show how civilized they were. Because in a way, with being in the South, a lot of times white people would not see them as civilized. And so unless the children's hair was in a certain way, they would not be considered civilized. And so that was something else, another, like, like you said, gatekeeping, like way kind that they could explain how they cared for their children, and also a sense of protection almost as well, right? Because if the kids were in line and if they were appropriate and if they were acceptable to white people, then they would be protected. So, all right. All of you all are researchers from various disciplines, such as psychology to marketing to design, and you have all done much work on the topic of Black hair. Why did you choose this as a topic? Why was this so significant to you that you would want to spend so much time, wanting to break this topic down?
I started researching in 2015, and it's because I did not know how to do my hair. I had went natural probably 3 years before that, and I was thinking to myself, there's no way that I'm the only one, of course. And so I had been watching a lot of YouTubers, and I was just like, there has to be a way to like streamline this process using design. And so that's what I chose to do for my my master's thesis. But it was because of my own experience really that interested me, and I just didn't understand why I was, how old was I? Like 25 or something, and I didn't know, how to do my hair.
I would say,
Similarly,
uh-oh.
I'm sorry. Similarly, I also went to YouTube to learn how to do my hair. And I think at that point, I really wanted to, really historicize from I have an art history, cultural history background. So I wanted to really think of it from a historical standpoint as to like, well, how did we get here? How did we get to YouTube? How did we get to Instagram? How did we get to these different platforms as the mode in which we share this information? And so I think for me it was that curiosity of like, wow, this is amazing. This is genius that as Black women we're doing this. I wonder how this came about and kind of following that trail.
Okay, and I think Dr. Mitchell, you're about to say something.
I was going to say a few things. The first one is, Tameka, you introduced me to research in Black hair. Most of my research is about whitewashing and skin complexion for Black women and women of color. But I also want to say that you guys are inspiration to me because I do not wear my natural hair. I don't like put chemicals in it, but I don't wear like natural hair. So just starting doing research on this when I first started doing it, it's just fascinating to me, but still to this point, I have not got to the point where I feel like 100% comfortable, even with, all the research and the things I know.
And that's something to unpack already. I mean, why does Dr. Mitchell have to go through these steps just to feel comfortable being who she is, who she naturally was born as? These are the conditioning, the brainwashing that we've been put under for so long that we don't even know how to accept ourselves. We still have so long to go. We have such a long way to go still where we can feel comfortable accepting ourselves. And I appreciate that you were transparent and authentic and wanting to share that, because that's the truth. A lot of our Black women are nervous about the texture of their hair. A lot of them have never even seen the texture of their hair. I know when I first went natural, I was in college. I hadn't even seen what the texture of my hair was going to look like. I didn't know. And so many of us as grown adult women don't even know what the texture of our hair is because we got our hair straightened ever since we were a child. So, it's a journey. It really is a journey, sweetheart. And I'm glad that you are even thinking about getting on that journey.
I think it's a nuanced conversation because like even at like my peak when I'm feeling like wonderful and like all the curls is just popping and I'm feeling great, I go out into the world and I can't find the hair product that I need. Or, the president's wife can't be natural until he's not actively serving as president. Yeah. So like it's one thing for like me to try and build up the confidence, but when the world is structured in such a way that rejects every part of who I am, can't find my makeup, skin, hair products, can't find things specifically for my experience as a Black woman, it's like I'm trying here, but then the world is saying stop trying because we're not going to help you. So I think it's a nuanced conversation, and I think it will forever be something that we all have to work on, because I feel like I even like some days I'm like I'm gonna shave it all off, like I'm just gonna wear a wig, like I can't do it. So I think it's a nuanced, like never ending cycle.
And we're talking also about the social consequences of being natural in a society that basically rejects or has this anti-Black aesthetic. So, I mean, and I appreciate like the fact that you're saying like, yeah, we can't get our makeup, even if I want to go buy jeans, if you have a pronounced behind, but your waist is small, like there's so many things that show a rejection of our bodies and our sense of embodiment. So kind of answering your question, Tameka, Dr. Ellington, I've been a natural hairstylist for over 30 years. And so my experience in terms of being a natural hairstylist for so long was literally the experience of either convincing or the testimony behind Black women and Black girls going natural. And there were typically so much to unpack. I mean, the rejection, the hurt, the fear, you know, even now as we accept natural hair so much more, people still want smooth edges.
Mm.
You know, we see just
They
these
sure
little
do.
ways, right, in which
Yep.
the non-Black aesthetic is still kind of creeping in. So with this topic, I actually ran from doing this topic for research because I had done hair for so long as a sociologist. I didn't want to kind of get pigeonholed into being like a hair sociologist, everything being natural hair, because I was very much concerned with various issues around systemic gender racism for Black people. But having did my master's on Black families at home school, did a research study on race and entrepreneurship, one of my mentors, she's like, you owe it to the women that you come in contact with in terms of telling their stories in a way that is scholarly. And she was like, you have access to their narratives. And that really just, you know, that was the moment where it's like, okay, there's one thing where you get to be this holder and this keeper of the narrative where you are comforting Black women when you're helping them go natural. But it's another thing when you get to contribute their stories in academia and you validate their experience and you criticize the systems that have made them feel this way. So that was really my kind of entry, was my mentor telling me,
Wow.
you know, you need to do this. And then also because I had been doing hair for so long, I noticed the conversation around natural hair was changing because it was this language around movement. There was this dynamic thing where people were going on videos, the hair products, this kind of epistemic authority that was coming from Black women around their natural hair. And it was something very dynamic and very different. So I think for me, it was a culmination of, you know, one, being this kind of keeper of these narratives when you are a hairstylist and you get to know these very intimate things about women and even Black men around natural hair, this conversation that was changing. So you're kind of seeing this shift. And then basically another Black woman getting on me saying, look, you need to write us into the narrative of academia. So that was my experience.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, my experience kind of mirrors Dr. Taylor's in that sense, in terms of I always loved doing hair. I was my family stylist. There would be a lawn chair at cookouts and people would line up for me to do hair. And so that continued when I went to the University of Pennsylvania for undergrad, where it was a PWI. There were very few Black students. And of course, you know, as Black students go to college, they don't always have the same hair care experiences. So a lot of the Black students would come to my room and I'd have this pop-up salon. And so I would spend hours and hours getting to know my classmates. I never charged anyone. I wasn't business minded. I just enjoyed the process of doing hair. And so I remember, well, I was also a psychology major. And I remember talking to my aunt on the phone one day. She's now an ancestor. And I was telling her, I don't know if I want to go on to study hair or psychology. And so she said, well, why can't you do both? Now, I don't think she was telling me to do both at the same exact time, but that's the way I interpreted it and thought, I can do hair and therapy together. So I then went to Howard University and had this idea like, oh, I'm going to study hair and psychology. And people were like, no, we don't do that here. This was 2004. And so I actually found the faculty to be extremely rejecting of the concept. I'm like, no, Black people, hair salons, barbershops, like it all goes together. And they're like, no. So I ended up studying racial identity. And so it wasn't until I got a tenure track position that I then opened up a hair and psychology research lab, where that was the only focus to study hair and psychology. So psychotherapy, which is using hair as an entry point into mental health. And so it was scary to be on tenure track and only writing about hair and mental health, the psychology of hair. And so I ended up in my 5 years on tenure track publishing like 30 articles and book chapters, because there wasn't anything out there. And so the lab started in 2014, and it just, we had data collection at hair salons and barbershops in Washington, D.C., like having street teams literally mapping out the 72 hair salons and barbershops in D.C. and having my research students go there with iPads and helping people fill out surveys while they were getting their hair done. Of course, consenting to it. And so that this was the data set that was initially collected called the Hair Health and Heritage Survey. And so that's where so much of the publications have come from, using this guided hair autobiography that I developed to get these early memories, these low points, these high points, these turning points in understanding hair. And so it's interesting. I have like a podcast that I would talk about each article that I was publishing. And that's how Dr. Ellington found me, because I actually interviewed Shawnee Crow, who did Solange's hair, especially for her hair for the Saturday Night Live taping, where she had this huge like crown of braids. And then just even having these partnerships then in terms of being involved with textures, and now this book to be able to write with authority. You all, I did not get tenure. And so that's why you see my psychological services on there, because even with going above and beyond, still understanding this topic is very controversial. I'm not bitter, because I'm still doing great things and using the research to inform the Crown Act and things like that. But just to even recognize there still is this tension between this hair research and academia.
You know, I find it so interesting that even today, like when I first started out, that was when I really first started doing this research was in 2002. That's when I started noticing that people were questioning me. Like, well, what exactly are you going to be studying? Like, what exactly is there to study about Black hair? And then for you, you know, at this stage in your career, to still have to defend this topic, the rigor, having to defend the rigor of this topic. You know, I mean, this is a topic, and especially even too, like amongst, you were saying that, you know, being at Howard, having to defend it amongst Black colleagues. And I know, you know what, and as you were talking, I think what was coming to my mind was my mentor when I first started, and I told her that I wanted to study this, and she was like, well, I'm afraid for you to do it because I want you to get tenure and promotion. And I think that if you do this kind of research, you're not going to get tenure and promotion, because they don't see our work as relevant research. And luckily, I was hard-headed and I did whatever I wanted to do anyway, and it worked out. But she was afraid for me. She was just like, I'm sure the people at Howard, they were probably afraid for you, you know, to do this kind of work, because they know that the industry, many industries, we are all in very different industries, all of us, but we all have this Black hair undertone, like our inquiry, right? In all of those disciplines, there's this question, like, what's the rigor? Like, you know, why is this so important? You know, and that's going to be the next question I'm going to ask you. Like, what does Black hair mean to the overall Black community? Anybody want to tap in on that one?
I think it's just such a large question.
Mhm.
That's why we're sitting here like,
It is.
yeah, I mean, what doesn't it mean? I think even this idea around, you know, the dialogue around, if you wear your natural hair, you have this type of politic, versus if you don't. I think that's a huge one for us. And I think that to me is taking on that white supremacist culture with like identifying who people are just based on their phenotype and what they look like. But I think for the Black community specifically, you know, I honestly think that needs to be a conversation around not only race, but how class also affects what hair means. Because I feel like, you know, like in the hood where my family's from, like, you know, you're wearing natural hair. It's not some like Black power, you know, oh, you're kind of elite. It's more like you're kind of poor and we're going to look down on you, versus like in a area that has more money, access, and resources, there's a whole different view around natural hair. So again, it's like really nuanced. And again, that's just my experience.
Yeah.
But it's such a nuanced conversation around like what it actually means to have natural hair and be in the Black community, in certain areas of the Black community, and what that means to folks.
Anybody else?
It's interesting you bring that up, because when I was doing my interviews, one of my participants, she's an actress, and she was saying that she didn't appreciate, like particularly in the media, how they use natural hair to signify lower class, lower income, impoverished people, right? Like kind of like what you're saying, the idea of that natural hair in the media, if they had natural hair, or they had the braids or cornrows, it was like this idea of stating their class status. So I definitely heard someone actually kind of echo what you were saying. When I'm thinking, and I'm speaking from my research, but one of the things that was interesting was with the natural hair movement as we currently saw it within the last 10 plus years, there was this intergenerational bridging that was happening. Because so when I was doing hair, like you mentioned Howard, I was at Howard in undergrad, it was the college girls that were going natural. And then there was this period, like once we got into like the 2000s, we started seeing Black women who were professional going natural. You know, it took a little time. But one of the things that was interesting was how many people were getting their grandmothers or their mothers to go natural. So I'm thinking about, like, in terms of the community, like where we are now, like this kind of reaching back. And then the other thing I was thinking about, like how many Black women, like the Black Girls Run and the Black Girls Bike, and where we saw Black women being active, and many of us were going natural too at that point, in the community around our health. But then also with that health was also, okay, well, what are you using on your hair? Swapping products. There's a lot of space, even too, like with the brothers, if you're walking down the street and the brother be like, oh, I like your hair, you know, like even if they weren't really trying to holler, but they were just like affirming you. There are so many realms to the community aspect of the natural hair. And then even some of the rejection too, you know, around it as well. So we could probably go on, but definitely think about the symbolism and the various different spaces from, you know, health, relationship, intergenerational, even beauty, in terms of, like, you know, us supporting people because they sell Black hair products and us doing it, you know, kind of like that, you know, for us, by us type of thing. So I definitely see how it's very integral in various aspects of how we do community.
Absolutely. And so we are going to be opening the floor for some questions in just a moment. So if you have a question for anyone, please put it in the chat, and we'll be looking to try to answer as many questions as possible. And so my last question is going to be based on the Crown Act. And so for those of you that don't know what the Crown Act is, it's legislation that was first put in place in California in 2019. It stands for creating a respectful and open world for natural hair. And this Crown Act has been adopted across the United States in several different states. There are still, the majority of the states have not passed it. This legislation was able to be passed in the House of Representatives back in March. Unfortunately, in December, the Senate did not pass the legislation. And so my question to you all, ladies, is what do you all think needs to happen in order for us to get this legislation passed?
That's
a hard question.
It is. I'm thinking about if this legislation were to pass, how folks who don't even want Black history taught in schools would have to explain to students why this legislation exists.
Absolutely.
So there's there is such a foundational thing that needs to happen. We need to be talking about reparations. There's so many other things that I think need to happen before they would even think of this being an issue that they're even care about, and they really could do it on a performative level, but they don't even want to do that and validate the experiences of Black women, you know? And so there is a deeper conversation around the Black experience in the United States that I think needs to start and happen before this could even be considered like seriously. I will say my state just passed it a couple of weeks ago in Minnesota. So that was exciting news, but it really should have been an easy thing. It's like, don't discriminate based off what somebody looks like, and not even be able to do that, to not even be able to talk about Black history. Like, there's just so many things happening in the US that I'm kind of like, we're in the twilight zone right now. So,
Mhm. Absolutely. I mean, it shouldn't even be an issue. Like, why is this? It shouldn't even be an issue. You know, it's a blatant example that they really they don't have any idea, first off, and then they don't want to know. You know, if it's not affecting them, then they don't want to know. Anybody else want to jump on this one? What needs to happen for us to be able to pass the Crown Act? Honestly, one of the things that I believe needs to happen as Black people, as Black women, because we would be the ones to lead this, right? Um, I truly believe that we really need to step up and say no more. A lot of us, and this is no disrespect to the women that are leading this, because we've had a team of amazing women who have been leading the way on this path of us getting this legislation passed. But most of you know that some of those women also still wear their hair straightened, right? And so if those women are able to represent what we're trying to get past here, then maybe they might take it a little bit more serious. If we all step up and say no more, then maybe they'll be able to take it a little bit more serious. But it's just, I don't know. It's hard. It's a blatant example of the fact that discrimination still exists, that they don't care anything about wanting to get rid of discrimination. I mean, because this shouldn't even be an issue. This should not even be anything to discuss. It's like, okay, we don't want to discriminate against people. So, especially about, something as simple as their hair. So, but any last remarks?
I
Thank you,
think too,
ladies.
it's about control.
Absolutely, Tarsa.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it's about.
Like they don't want to give that up. And so to be able to have to be like, yeah, well, now we have to accept you for who you are. I mean, think of all of the laws that, are in the last 100 years, like Black women had to wear scarves on her head because we was making white women jealous. Like, like all of these things around like controlling what we look like, even like our body types just fitting in clothing is an issue, with what we're
Absolutely.
naturally born to look like. So I think it's about control. And then this again need like to disrespect and invalidate our experiences.
Mm, mm. That breaks my heart. Mm. All right, so we are going to open up the floor for some questions. Kate, my amazing assistant, is going to read off a couple questions for us, and hopefully, we can get your questions answered. So, Kate, come on up.
Hi everyone. So I have here the first question. It's from Sloan King. So the question is, in the process of writing this book, did the research take you into unexpected places or topics you did not anticipate during the preparation?
I would say, in some ways it did. In particular, when I was in the process of curating textures, one of the things that I really battled with was this whole idea that people were saying, oh, this is such a timely topic. I'm so sick of hearing that. This is not a timely topic. This is something that we've been dealing with as Black people for centuries. This is not a timely topic. What makes it timely is that now people's ears are perked up because of all the social unrest that and so that was something that I really and truly struggled with. Hearing non-Black people tell me how timely this topic was. That was something that I was not expecting, but it was really hard to hear.
I think you're touching on that intersection between race and capitalism.
Absolutely.
Because I deal with this as a designer and an artist, right? As soon as 2020 hit, everybody's trying to hire us to speak on this, speak on that, because like finally Black lives suddenly matter. And now they kind of don't anymore because, the dust is kind of settled. So that's what you're hitting on, is like this commodification of the Black experience, like them wanting to like kind of gaze at our experience, but not then pass the legislation and the policy that we're asking them to pass so that we can like live lives fully,
Yeah. Thank you, Kate. Anybody else want to tap in on that before Kate reads another question? Okay. All right, Kate.
Okay. Another one from Misha. I hope I pronounced your name right. So the question is, the work is certainly going to have to start within the Black community. So how can we use Black hair as a tool for increasing sisterhood and brotherhood?
I have a perspective on this. I think there has to be, I think about like the way that we also reify or reinforce inequality intraracially, and the ways in which we designate certain hairstyles as being like, we reinforce this conversation around what is professional and what's unprofessional. As we said too, like, you know, our earliest ideas around you know, our hair not being attractive or being unattractive is in home, in the community, right, amongst family. You know, even to the extent that we deal with the colorism and the texturism within our families as it varies in the comparisons. I think it's also just a matter of not just simply embracing natural hair, but it's like even the idea that if a sister wants to wear her hair straightened, that we support her and we elevate. Like, the idea is that hair is it can be an aesthetic. It can be something that we can amend and play and have a fun time with. At the same time, we have so many ideas around what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, what signifies that you're down and you're not down. And so I think really for us, because really where we get a lot of that kind of sense of our integrity, like when we think about Du Bois and the double consciousness, it's like, you know, I can face what's going on out in the world if I know that my mother, my sister, my auntie, cousins, you know, they got my back and they're sending a particular message, you know. And I think Afia spoke to that, Dr. And is it Mbili Shaka? Spoke to that, where we get this positive reinforcement in the home, and this person is set up to tackle everything that comes at them, right? So I think in that sense, it's also really us kind of giving us full free range just to show up. However, if my child wants to have blue hair tomorrow, you have blue hair, right? If you want to wear it straightened, if you want to wear a mohawk, if you want to wear finger waves or the doobie, if you want to wear your bonnet, like all of these ways in which we're doing this gatekeeping and we are policing ourselves, we are sending a particular negative message. And this is not to deny the systemic racism that's outside, that is a part of that. But I think kind of going into what Teresa was saying is like also this idea of creating this love within ourselves, you know, this kind of messaging within ourselves, then we can kind of funnel it out, you know, and that's just my perspective on it personally.
Yeah. Go ahead. Afia.
Yeah, I love this concept of hair being a tool and a healing tool at that. I'm really thinking about rituals, right? So I know Dr. Ellington is entrenched in all of the African rituals of using hair to heal, from ancient Kemet to present day, where a ritual we can define as the way we prepare our mind, body, and spirit to receive a blessing, and how hair care has been, you know, used from naming ceremonies to rites of passage, weddings, and even death rituals that are actually, the hair is actually used to unify families and communities. The hair is such a complex language system, and I think that that we can have self-knowledge and collective knowledge around these hair rituals that we engage in across the African diaspora. And even how hair on the continent of Africa can connect to some of these hair rituals that we're practicing today, to have this sort of African diaspora alliance through hair care rituals.
And to add, I was just thinking about some of the research, some of the interviews. A lot of times, people would say that, so my research with hair was on locks, specifically. So I spoke to, like, for this particular research, over like 75 people that had locks. And a lot of them had said they had started this as a transition to like a new person, to leave everything else behind. Just like, you know, how, you know, we might cut our hair because we want to, you know, start a new life, or, you know, a new transition. And so that was like a ritual that I was seeing a pattern with when I was talking to people about their natural hair and locks in particular.
Yeah. Anybody else? And with that said, because we need to start wrapping this up, I want to make sure that we don't go too far beyond our time. But with that said, the practice of being someone who wants to wear your hair natural, it is a total lifestyle change, because the way in which we were brought up, we were not taught as young people how to take care of our hair. And so it's a whole new learning. It's a whole new way of being. I remember Teresa was just talking about how she didn't know how to take care of her hair. Most of us, most women, if you became someone who was natural in your adulthood, it was a learning curve that you had to go through in order to be able to accept this. So it is the research that you delve into, Dr. Mitchell, and talking about people wanting to change their life. It is truly a life-changing event when you decide to go natural. Yeah, it is. And so with that, we are going to move on. And I wanted to give a gift to everyone that came. So if you are still on and you want this gift is, I packaged together for you my article about natural hair and my article on cornrows. A couple years ago, I wrote these articles for the Berg Encyclopedia of World Dress, and they asked me to write these articles about natural hair and cornrows. So if you are wanting to get this gift, please go ahead and scan the QR code and we will make sure that you get that gift. Okay. And Sue, you are up.
Thank you.
Ladies.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. I mean, this has been really just great. And I mean, it's a shame it's 6:45. It doesn't, I mean, it went so fast. I just feel like it went really fast. I just want to say that we at the Kent State University Press are really, really grateful to Dr. Ellington and all of the contributors to this book. I mean, not just for this evening and not just for your dedication to the book project, but also just for your willingness to share your own experiences, really let everyone benefit from all of your research, all of your work over the years. I mean, if we would take the combined total of all the years of work and thinking about this that you've done, I mean, it's just amazing. And I'm really appreciative of that. I think we can all agree that this book, these talks, the exhibit, actually the conference we didn't even talk about that Dr. Ellington put on in the fashion school that I went to quite a number of the presentations. All of these things have been just remarkable and important. And I take Teresa's point very well about the fact that, that these things, one moment they say, oh, this is really important, we should talk about this, the whole society says this, and the next minute it's kind of like it's being overlooked again. And that's exactly what Tameka is talking about when she says she's tired of people saying it's timely. I mean, of course it is timely when people like, Ron DeSantis are saying you can't teach these things in the schools anymore. That makes it timely again, but it's always timely because these topics have not gone away. I don't think they're going away anytime soon, which is unfortunate. Not just unfortunate, but crazy. I would just point out a couple of things real quick that you'll see there on that slide. There's a link there to pre-order the book. It would ship in July. It might even ship at the end of June. It just kind of depends on when it's all done. So please make note of that link. And if you have any questions about that, or you don't have the link, please let me know. We're happy. I'd also mention that, excitingly, a couple of other things. One is that we will do an in-person book launch for this book in September, in late. at the Kent State University main library on campus. We will, have presentations there. I know Tameka will be there and speaking and available to sign books. And I'm hopeful that a number of the contributors can be there as well. And also perhaps sign your book if you have a book, either one that you've pre-ordered and received or one that you want to buy there. And even just to be part of the conversation. A book launch does not ever mean that people have to buy a book or have to do anything. It's really, we want to share just the work of the authors that we publish and the ideas and the very important narratives that people are putting forward. So we always want to share that with as much of the community and the campus community as we can. That'll just give us another opportunity to continue these discussions. I would also say, and if everyone's seen that slide about the pre-order, Tameka, if you go, or Kate, if you go to the next slide, you'll also see how to contact Dr. Ellington for other presentations or book discussions. Starting in September, she's doing quite a number of things to continue this discussion and to promote the book, but really just to continue the discussion as well. So if you're interested in having her come and talk with you or do a Zoom presentation or a Zoom discussion like we did tonight, I know that she is incredibly open to that. And we are very supportive of that. So please make note of that and contact her if that's something you'd like to do. And you can also contact us at the press to help facilitate that as well. If there's something we can do to put you in touch with her or to think about how you would get books or anything like that, please let us know. And I'm just grateful that everyone has been here and been a part of this discussion. And I thank you for letting me be a part of it as well.
Thank you, everybody. It was so wonderful to have you on. And for those of you that hung in there with us, thank you so much for joining us today. And hopefully we'll see you at the book signing in September. All right. Bye, ladies. I love you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.